Hi there. Again, this is Clifford Bates, and welcome to our continuing episode looking at basically reading Machiavelli's Prince. Today, on this video, we are going to be looking at Chapter 1. The previous video, which I uploaded earlier, looked at the introduction and framed the book, and I kind of introduced it, framed it, and talked about Machiavelli's life a little bit, and reading from the famous letter to Veroli, talked about the Prince, its importance in that sense, but also introduced it from the book itself, from the Epistle Dedicatory, where which again talks about the book. It frames the content of the book. As I said earlier, the structure of this, the Prince, I'll repeat it just for maybe you didn't pay attention to it and maybe didn't care, looks at it from the fourfold parts of the Prince. The first part, chapter 1 through chapter 11, gives us on Principalities. The second part, The Arms and Man, which deals with chapters 12 through 14. Starting with chapter 15, ending with chapter 19, deals with the virtual character of the Prince. And then the fourth part, chapters 20 to 25, deals with what we can call the prudence of the Prince. We'll talk about this when we get there, about how there is kind of like this testing of the reader in that sense. This is again one thing about Machiavelli is the degree of shock. We talked about every introduction here. Chapter formerly is in Italian, but then immediately the text itself goes. The titles are in Latin. That flipped it. The Italians are traditional Latin titles, the language of the scholars and the scholarly community. This book should have been, normally if this was a normal intellectual book, and this is what's shocking about it. The shocking character of the Prince is that it's not written in Latin. It's written in ordinary Italian, and that is the kind of breaking aspect of it, challenging aspect of it, shocking in that sense. Machiavelli did this to shock the reader. In fact, a lot of the Prince is designed to shock. In fact, the shock is maybe a kind of a rhetorical device that he uses to. We are all shocked all the time, and we actually miss the really shocking things. In other words, he will shock us with the ordinary, and the very ordinary of the ordinary language. In other words, he uses the ordinary language of everyday life, and therefore he shocks us with the ordinary. He shocks us and scandalizes us with shocking things. And what we will miss, most readers who are not paying attention, not care, will miss the truly shocking aspects of his thinking. The way he does kind of break, and in many ways, what's so interesting about the Prince is, and if you compare it, let's say, with Aristotle's Politics, right? Particularly the middle books. I mean, this is, people always say books 4, 5, and 6 sound very Machiavellian, particularly chapter 5, right? Chapter 5 about on change and preservation, particularly the chapters about preserving monarchy and preserving tyranny. All right, in chapters 10 and 11, sound it's almost like a mini Prince, and that's in fact, in many ways, Machiavelli, some would argue that there's nothing really original in Machiavelli. What Machiavelli is the things that will shock us in Machiavelli were said by the ancients. So what is going to be the shocking new in Machiavelli? Well, this is something that we will think about over the course of time. Of our reading. Let us turn now. Again, we'll start with the concern about the Prince, about who is the audience. Again, the audience here is a busy man, but he tells us in the Epistle Dedicatory we should read with care and seriousness. So let's do that. Okay, let's turn to the text. and read with some care and seriousness. The title of chapter 1 is, it opens the title first with the title of it, of Prince in Latin is, in fact, the Alvarez translation will have the Latin at the end of every page, at the end of the, in fact, this is what's interesting. It says, it has in Latin, the titles are again Latin, and that's the Epistula Dedicatoria. Here's the first chapter. The title will be here in Latin. Therefore, quinsist genera principatum et quara modus equitor. Okay, which in translation of it is how many kinds of principates are there, and by what modes are they acquired? Now this is modus, the modes. This is something that will play a very big thing in the discourses, modes and orders. There's a promise of new modes and orders. The new, shocking, the new, the nova, and the new world. The new world. Remember when Machiavelli's writing this, the new world has been discovered, right? The Columbus of 1492, right? You have to remember, although Columbus is not a Florentine, Columbus is Venetian, right? But the people who make the maps, Florentine map makers, the great Florentine map makers. In fact, the man who will help, of course, Isabella and the Spanish court will kind of be the patron of Columbus, but it's the financing of the endeavor, the banking of it is done by the Medici Bank, and Amerigo Vespucci, who is the principal financer, and travels with Columbus to the New World, and then eventually later will even do his own explorations to the New World. In fact, it is not Columbus who realizes this is a new continent. Columbus thinks he just found some new islands near in the Indies. That's what it's called. We call it the West Indies, right? Because he thinks that these are this is the islands near the Indies. No, it's Amerigo Vespucci, when he discovers the the Amazon basin. He realizes this is not a mere island. You go to the port of Columbia, there on the coast, and goes down south, and he realizes this is not an island. This is huge. You look into the Nile Delta. It's like not Nile Delta seas, Amazon Delta. You realize it's a thing. Vespucci's letters to his cousin about his discovery. Well, Vespucci's cousin was working with Machiavelli in the Florentine Secretariat, and Machiavelli would surely have read Vespucci's letter, particularly about the discovery, and the famous letter that was published. It was kind of turned into a kind of public book, kind of mini book that was about the discovery of the New World, right? In that letter, Vespucci will say that this discovery of the New World showed that ancient knowledge was wrong, that the Greeks and the ancients didn't know. They understood. They knew, the ancient science knew that the world was round, but they thought the world, and that's why Columbus was knowing Columbus knew that the world was round. Everyone knew the world was round. The problem was the ancients were wrong about the size, and the argument here is, therefore, the old learning is now, in other words, the ancients were wrong, and as this idea that the intellectual traditions we are hearing are no longer valid, or no longer true. This is what Machiavelli is doing. He's saying that, listen, the political world we're dealing with, the old teachings of the classical world are no longer valid, and we need new thinking. We need new thinking about things. And this is what he's trying to offer here. So he opens up with the discussion here of the question of, okay, what are the principalities, right? And this chapter is a very short chapter. It has only it's a paragraph long. It was in sentences. It's about 4 or 5 sentences in length. The term titled De Principatum, De Alvarez's translation uses the word principate throughout this, or the principality. The principate, in that sense, this is a type of rinse. We have to understand the word prince. And this is what, the first thing we should understand is the title, the Principatum, the prince. In choosing this title, the prince, Machiavelli is making a political choice. Why am I saying this? He's honoring the Republican tradition. Even though this book's about princes, right? Why didn't he call it Rex, the Latin word for king? The Rex. Why isn't it called the Rex? It's called the Prince. Now, where does the word prince come from? Well, it comes from a guy named Octavius. Octavius, who then later becomes Augustus, the Roman emperor, the nephew of Caesar, who Caesar adopts as a son, and after the death of Caesar becomes a Roman. He becomes through a subterfuge with Cicero, thinking that he's going to be an ally against Mark Antony. Though yes, Anthony and Octavius were fighting, and were in conflict. Both of them still hated the people who killed Caesar more than each other in that sense, and therefore they would eventually come together to defeat the old Republican establishment that despised Caesar. But unlike his uncles, Octavian was a little saner. And also saner than Mark Antony. Mark Antony embraced the Greek conception of monarchy. In fact, when it will be his embracing of the Greek ideas under the Ptolemies, particularly the Ptolemy woman Cleopatra. The idea of Basileus, but in Greek, Basileus means great king, great leader. This doesn't. Wherein the Roman word Rex has much more negative connotations. The famous play Oedipus, right? Sophocles' Oedipus, right? In Latin, the Greek title of it is Oedipus Tyrannos, tyrant, right? The Latin translation of it, often we understand it, Oedipus Rex, Oedipus the king. The concept, the Roman concept of the Rex, is something that is much more fearful, and this is because the idea is the king comes from the father, the power of the father. The Roman concept of imperium, the power of life and death, that soldier generals have, the power of life and death, is something the fathers have, the paternal power. In the Roman family, the fathers have the power to kill their children throughout their lives, not just when they're young. Even as long as the father's alive, the father has the ability to, and the right to punish his children, discipline, including with killing them in that sense, if he sees fit in that. And this is the Romans. The Roman father has a little terror about him that the Greek father would not. I mean, the Greeks, because of the taboo of touching one's own blood, the Greeks do not have this great tradition of the right to kill your own children. Rather, instead, what they do is they usually lock up the wife. The wives are the ones who get locked up and constrained and imprisoned, where Roman wives are still under the authority and protection of their family, their male kin family. In other words, a wife never really belongs into the new family. The children of the couple are in the family, but the wife is not in this sense. the wife is always under the protection of her parent, and that if a divorce happens, if there's a separation or a divorce, the marriage ends. Often, if there was not some cause done by the wife, some reason, legitimate cause, the gifts, the dowries would have to be returned. Okay, the dowry would have to be returned, and therefore there was no really, if you had some and for there to be a cause for the divorce, you just couldn't do it yourself. Her father or her brothers would have to agree to that cause, that it was a cause, and legitimate that cause. So therefore, that was very unlikely sometimes, particularly when money and possessions were involved. So therefore, there was taboo against touching wives, or this. In other words, the Roman world, wives were held in more esteem than the Greek world, but at the same time, children were under the kind of control of the parent, into ways that in the Greek world there was a limit, because of the idea of the Furies. The Furies were if you read you read Hesiod's classic Theogonies, which talks about the origins of with Saturn castration of Uranus, which was the first god. That Saturn's or Jupiter's Saturn conquers Jupiter, and what happens here is this the blood from the castration brings up the Erimes, the Furies of vengeance, which anytime anyone's blood is spilled, the blood will then bring up these demons of force to demand vengeance. This is the Erimes or the Furies are very much into the play Aeschylus' Orestes. The Aeschylus, Aeschylus' famous the Oresteia, the three-plot play of the killing of the killing of the great captain of the Agamemnon, the great leader of the conquering of Troy, to liberate, to get Helen back. Right? He comes. The whole story. Right? He sacrifices the daughter to the gods to appease the gods. Right? The gods. Poseidon demands a blood sacrifice, and therefore he lies to his wife to get the daughter to think that the daughter's going to marry Achilles, but no, she's sacrificed. Iphigenia is sacrificed, and upon hearing this, Agamemnon's wife wants vengeance, and she becomes a fury herself, and then she takes vengeance on him when he comes back. She and her lover kills Agamemnon. And then what happens is Apollo, under the authorities of Zeus, orders Orestes to kill his mother. And then what happens is her blood, when he kills her in the second play, in the last play, what happens is Orestes is being haunted by these the Furies of his mother's demanding that he kill himself. He killed his... and there's the famous trial. Now, why did I bring that play in there? And why am I talking about this? Well, because this is the difference. That this is imperium, Roman imperium. Now, the title of Rex would imply a choice of monarchy, right? Not the title is. This title refers to a civil body. Octavius coins the concept Principatum purposefully as a way not to embrace monarchy, Rex, to avoid Rex. Because remember, the whole taboo of Rome was anyone who wanted, the city Brutus and his republic, when he establishes the republic, the res publica, right, the public thing. That's what republic means, the public thing, the res publica. This public thing that all the citizens share, And one of the taboos was anyone who would wish to give Rome a king, or would be king, desired to be king, or give Rome a king, or have Rome have a king, they forfeited their life. You could kill them. This is why the plotters will use the argument that Caesar wanted to become king. When Mark Antony kind of adorns him with these attempts of being, the crowns and things, as the danger. In other words, the dictators. The Romans had dictators. It wasn't because that he was a dictator. The Romans routinized dictatorship in that sense. It was an emergency office. It was an office within the republic. So it wasn't the dictatorship that was the threat. It was the permanency of rule, of being a monarchy, and the destruction of the public thing, the Republica, the Respublica. And therefore, and Octavian did not want to suffer his uncle's fate. Did not want to assassinate. So what he did was Octavius consciously clothed his rule. His rule was a very much a rule of an autocrat, one man. It was the Senate was nothing more than a rubber stamp of his ability with the army behind him, able to. He used the Senate. He used the institutions to kind of govern. In other words, he didn't want to govern through himself. He wanted to govern through the Republican institutions. He dragged in other words, it's monarchy in Republican dress. And Octavian did this purposefully. Now, why am I talking about this little background history? Because to understand the title of Principalities, why Machiavelli uses the term prince, not rex, king, shows the civic character of this. Like Octavian. Octavian was not, he's going to still have an autocratic rule. It's going to be the rule of a monarchy, a rule of a one man, one principal man. But it was going to be clothed in the dress and the institutions of the Republic. Well, Machiavelli is going to do something here. What he does is he takes the Roman Republican character and the Roman political tradition, and he's going to expropriate it. As much as Octavian appropriates the Republic for his end, Machiavelli is imitating Octavian here, but not for in name of Republican. He's expropriating the Roman Republican or the Roman political tradition and the symbol of the prince and its role as that, and offering as a new model. Therefore, the new form is not going to be the old order of the old civic order, political order. It is now going to be the prince, which is what? Of the term of state, the stato, which we'll talk about in that sense. Now, it is in this paragraph, the word la stato. La stato is the big word here that we'll talk about. The prince, la stato is, can I say it? Lo stato means the state of a thing. I mean, it's nothing like that. The term Machiavelli's use of lo stato to refer to the public thing, this thing, the body politic, the state. That this is unique. This is the unique moment. This is the modern. In other words, the Machiavelli's coining of this. Now, some people say, "Oh, but everyone is using this." It is, in many ways, the Florentines are doing this, but Machiavelli here in the literature and his earlier writings to letters and discourses, I think we can probably make a very good argument of his role of shaping the language here, shaping the language of people. I think this is there's a very good book by Varieties called From Politicus to Reasons of State, right? This Varieties' famous book for Cambridge University Press, where he kind of talks about this transition of language, from talking about political rule, politics, from politics to reason of state. La stato is the state. This becomes the ancient political form was constantly understood as the city or the polis, right? This was the constant political form of the polis, the city, the civic order, the civitas, right? In the Latin, you could understand a city as an herb. The word usually for city was urban. We get the word urban from it, right? But also civic, civitas, the civitas. There's two words for the city, herb and civitas. The civitas is the political characteristic, and herb has more. We have the origins of our concept of urban, right? The big, this urban structure, whereas the city, the English language word city, we think more urban. Therefore, polis as city misleads us. We think it's urban. The polis may be urban, may be rural, but it's a political community. Okay, this is the ancient political form of this political community. Some other time I'll talk in another thing. We'll talk about the ancients and how the political form as the polis and it was a discrete structure of parts of communities of households, and therefore had needed the thing called the regime politeia, or the regime to hold together. Machiavelli gives us a completely different thing. The Machiavelli opens us, and this is why maybe we should pay attention here to what he says here. Let's go look here quickly at the text. He starts, all the states, all the dominiums that have had and have imperium over men have been and are either republics or principalities. First sentence, declaratory. All the states, the statos. All this. I mean, the word stato meant status of a thing, the condition of a thing. Now, he's not using it in terms of condition. He's using it, referring it to a thing, not a condition. A state. What is your state? What is the state of a thing? What is the state? The condition of it. Okay, this is where the origin of that word came from, in Latin. The word status. Okay, the state, as it emerges, refers now to a thing, the thing of the body politic, the thing that is ruling. And he says of this concept, this body form, this form has two modes. This thing that has dominion, dominate. That's the word, the house of domain, and imperium, rule. Imperium, again, he has Alvarez's notes here. The translate here in most cases as imperium is the original meaning of at command of war and the interpretation, execution of the law within the jurisdiction of a command. Execution of the law especially means, of course, execution of the death penalty. So imperium is the power of the father. The imperium is the rule, it's general of the army, the power of life and death. Therefore, the dominium here means what? It means the authority, domination, to control, has control over life and death. And therefore, we have this sense of this. Now, of these things, of all these states, condition, these things, conditions of things. That's how we can understand it literally, right? This is how the literal would be. Because until we understand, we now have the concept of a state, but the Italian was not necessary. So therefore, if we think about what it really meant originally, this of the conditions that we have all these people are dominated under, are controlled by, and have imperium over men, are either what? Respublica, republics, or principalities. This is the two forms, the two varieties of the political form. In fact, this is a rejection of Aristotle. Aristotle would argue that, okay, maybe kingly, in other words, if we go back all the way to Politics 1, and if I was going to take my Aristotle's Politics out and say, look at book 1, chapter 1, and I look at my little thing here and take my glasses on there and say, oh, okay. the second paragraph, it goes, those who suppose that the same person is an expert in political rule, kingly rule, and household management, and being master of a slave, argue beautifully. For they consider that each of these differ in number or fewness of those ruled and not in kind. For example, a ruler of a few is a master, and more a household manager, and still more a political or kingly ruler. This assumption being that there's no difference between a large household and a small city. And for the political and kingly rulers, they consider a kingly ruler the one who has charge himself, and a political ruler one on the basis of a precept of this sort of science, rules in turn. But these things aren't true. Aristotle here is clear about this, that the nature of these kinds of early rule, that political rule and kingly rule are antithesis. Now, we can argue about, hey, but Clifford, but did you just say that our friend Machiavelli uses principe and not rex? Yes. So what happens? Well, this is interesting. Where Aristotle speaks of regimes, right? The politeia that separates, and we have the famous regimes of monarchy, tyranny, aristocracy, oligarchy, democracy, and the regime called regime, which a lot of people would call it polity, but that's another argument. But what happens here is that the regime, the politeia or constitution, will give the shape of the form of the political form. It will shape and direct the way of life and character. The regime becomes the thing. The politeia becomes the thing that makes the polis the polis. It becomes the thing that defines the classical political order. Regimes disappear in Machiavelli. They're there, but they're not important. Why? Because the regime here is presented as the difference between principality and what? Not kingship, not tyranny, but principalities and republic. And what's notice republic. Republic is both, in other words, Machiavelli, and this is something that we'll see in someone like Montesquieu. Hobbes follows Aristotle, even though he criticizes Aristotle. He separates rule of one, rule of few, rule of many. He collapses. He ignores the difference between good ruler and bad ruler. He says it's just like, but he keeps the one, few, many. And there's a difference between democracy and oligarchy, aristocracy. These are different. Popular rule and rule of the few, or the few are distinct. Machiavelli collapses the question of few and many as Republican rule. Republican rule, and this is something that Montesquieu will continue. Montesquieu will differ from Machiavelli's. The political form is between the question of a regime. In other words, the political form of the state is either two varieties, either principalities or republics. But then the republics would be the sub-varieties of that popular rule or the great, the aristocrats or the wealthy and the people, right? The democracy and oligarchy and aristocracy would be within Republican framework. And principalities would be princes and kings. So therefore, what's interesting in this is that we see that the regime has kind of fallen to a collapse. In other words, what was for Aristotle the big thing of regime now kind of collapses into a twofold characteristics. Now, therefore, he now sets off his discussion. After that first sentence, he now will set up the argument. The rest of the first chapter will kind of outline the rest of at least the first 11 chapters of the Prince. He goes what? He goes, Principates are either hereditary, so hereditary ones, which the blood of their lords has been long time princely, or they're new. So therefore, there's two types: hereditary princes or new princes. Hereditary princes and new princes, right? That's the first. That's the first split. The princes are they're hereditary. The blood of their ruler is royal for a long time, or he's new. Then what? And new are either all new, as was Milan for Francisco Sforza, or like the members joined to the hereditary state of a prince who acquires them, as the kingdom of Naples for the king of Spain. Well, the kingdom of Naples, the Spanish king got control of it. So it's, in other words, the king of Spain is the new prince of the kingdom of Naples, even though he's an old prince in Spain. Whereas Sforza is not acquiring something new, he's just someone who became a prince newly. So there's two sense of new. Either you're coming to power as a prince in a city that you were not prince before, or did not have a prince before. Or in other words, you switch from what the question was this prince? There's two elements of this. We'll talk about this. But then you're either wasn't a prince and now is a prince, or you just acquired a new territory. You were a prince who acquired a new territory. The next thing, after you give these examples, dominions thus acquired are either habituated to living under a prince or used to being free. In other words, so therefore I'm acquiring a new state. Either one, what? Either the both of these situations. Either that I'm someone who takes control of the prince, someone inside it, or an outsider who comes in and takes over. A prince from outside. Now, of this situation, of this thing that's being taken over, either internally or externally, is what it is. Voila, are they what? As it comes under your control, were they are they free before, or were they used to being ruled by prince or a rule? In other words, were they habituated to living under a prince, or are used to being free? And they are acquired. Now, how were they got acquired? How are they gotten? Okay, either by arms of others. In other words, someone else helps you get them. Someone else gives this to you. Gives this to the guy, the person. The arms of others, or with one's own arms. Okay. So either the arms of others or your own arms means. Arms, Machiavelli has this word of arms. What this means, the arms are the kind of understanding of how we are. Arms, we grab things, we take things. Our arms, arms are our ability to grab, to take. Acquire, okay? What acquire is to get, to make yours. We have a desire, as you say later, we have a natural desire to acquire, to get. And therefore our arms are how we arms mean our arms, but also means weapons, right? Our arms are weapons, right? Our arms are weapons in that sense. They're the naturalist of weapons that we have. We call the weapons we make arms as extensions of our arms, right? Okay, so therefore this play on arms, right? But then the one who is armed versus the one who's not unarmed. And then what else? The next line, he ends this on this line, after he says either one's own arms, comma, either by fortune or by virtue. In other words, either you get this by fortune, luck. You're lucky. You become a prince, or you succeed because of luck. Not because, or virtue. Now, what is by virtue? This means, virtue here is a very important term. What Machiavelli means by virtue and what maybe Aristotle would mean by virtue are completely different. What Aristotle and Plato, and Cicero, the Greeks would talk about arete. Arete means excellence. We talk about this. What does excellence meant? It means doing the right thing in the right way, the perfect way. I'll talk about it some other time. Quickly, it means it's kind of an act, knowing how to act and do act in the perfect way. Knowing how to do the right. It's knowing the true and correct action at that moment. And knowing how to do it. And how to do it beautifully. Okay, this is what arete or virtue, excellence means. This arete, virtue. Now the Latin word virtua, virtue. Now it meant the man. The virtu meant the man, man, manliness. It was that quality of that fundamentally defined a man as a man. Okay, it was that innate quality. This is how the Romans understood it. This is the difference in that sense. One is kind of a artistic. The Greeks had a more kind of a concept of the fine act being done not only well but beautifully. The Romans deal with this kind of aspect of this, of the character of the man's nature as a human being, virile. Now, what's so interesting is that once Christianity comes, by the 20th century, the word virtue means something completely different, right? By the 17th and 18th and 19th, by the 17th and 18th century, virtue means more something childlike, innocent. We speak of the virtue of a woman. That is purity, chastity, purity. This is a gift of Christianity. Christianity takes something that was the Roman masculinity is then turned into femininity. In other words, what was the height of, in other words, again, the Virgin Mary, the perfect virgin, the perfect innocent. This becomes the height of what is understood to be of virtue now. Virtue must shift from the manly man of action to the priest, and to the Holy Mother, right? That's the kind of conception of this, the switch of virtue. This is the history of political thought. From what was meant for the manliness of man becomes that innocent quality of the innocent of the young girl. We end today on that notion that Machiavelli talks about the question of how it happens. He divides us in a certain way. We talk about hereditary princes and princes new. The two ways. What then? There's what of those who are new. That's either wholly new because they become some of that, or they acquire some other state. And of either situation, were those people used to being ruled by prince, or were they used to being free? That's gonna be totally different. And how did you acquire it? Did you do it on your own, or did you do it because of arms of others, or your own arms? And then last but not least, the tension of whether it was not only that act, but how you got it. Was it because of fortune or through virtue? Now, arms, your own arms, other arms, virtue. Now, there's a pairing here. Notice the pairing. It goes. Notice through the pairing. There's a nice pairing here. That is either through the arms of others and your own arms, right? Fortune and virtue. Nice parallelism. The parallelism is to rely on the arms of others is to rely on fortune. It's parallel to rely on fortune, to rely on luck. To rely on your own arms is to rely on virtue. That is the innate, that the language gives a parallelism and it ends on that theme. And we'll end today on this today on here, and we'll turn to chapter 2 in our next meeting. Again, have a nice day, and hope you enjoy this. If you like this, please like this, share with someone else, and if you can find any way to help buy my books, my book on Aristotle. I have 2 books on Aristotle you can find on Amazon. And I'm working on something new. I'm working on this notebook on Aristotle, which is going to be a little notebook. That should be out in a couple months. This is now the 1st of June. I'm hoping by mid-June it should be out, mid to late June. Again, I am too stupid and dumb to do Patreon. I tried doing Subscribe-Star, but it has never, for some reason, Subscribe-Star has not recognized me. So I don't do enough, or who knows. And I don't have, my site is too small to get super chats or anything like that, or get monetization. So Of course, I take any help as I can get because I'm a poor scholar, and inflation has just wiped out my book collection. That's what I spend my money on. So again, welcome, and we'll see you again next time. Bye bye.